Hello again, our peeps. We're here for a comparison between acrylic and oil. So we've already brushed on oil, just a very little bit about oil, and we brushed on acrylic. I had those two art supply reviews. So now let's look at the pros and the cons of these materials and which one is probably best suited for any given situation that you're going to work in. So once again, it's going to be the battle. We are looking at acrylic versus oil. So as you recall, we've just brushed, like I said, the surface of acrylic and oil and the different properties involved. Now let's look at which ones, some of the properties between the two, the fundamental properties, and if that's going to work for you. So let's move right into oil. So I have a few oils here. Now, oil has grown. It's a medium that's been around since the 15th century, utilized in paintings. It's tried and true. It's gone through many different variations, more recent than in the past. It was pretty much established in the past. And we now have some varieties to oil. This is a basic oil. This is one of my faves. It's an olive green. I just love that deep green. And quite a big tube. I've had this for years, and it has all kinds of stains in the label, everything like that. So there's that. I have a phthalo blue right here. And I'm not going to open these up. The main reason is, and we've talked about this, how messy they are. If I open these, it's like opening a can of mess right into my workstation here. So unless I'm properly prepared to actually work with the oils, I'm not going to open them up and work around with it. But that's not needed for what we're talking about. We're just talking about some of the fundamental aspects of these paints and if it can work for you for your given project. Now I want to talk about some of the changes they made to oils. Now normally your oil is quite a thick substance in your tube. You'll use mediums to thin it out. You'll essentially use a thinner for some of your first coats, and then as you start to get further into a painting, start to really develop those layers, you may use a glaze. You may use something like a walnut oil, which I have here, and this one's quite old too, but you can see, I'm sure you can see that, and if not, I'll just put get some white here so that you can see. It's basically an oil. It's like any type of oil that you would see in olive oil, peanut oil, anything like that. Walnut oil is very, very much the same. It is a medium that you add to the paints to thin it out and to give it a more usable viscosity as opposed to the thickness that these are in the tubes with. So you have oil. We've talked about the linseed oil. Those are some options. Those are essential. You cannot get anywhere without using these mediums with your oil. It's going to hasten the drying time. It's going to assist in covering your canvas, all those sorts of things, and we have touched on some of this. Now this one here is actually, it's a duo. So it's an aqua oil. It's by Holbein, a paint company, and quite frankly I have used these in the past, being conscious of health from time to time, of course. They're not so good. I don't really like them. They're not the same properties, and that is where we get into the main point of what makes oil so respected, so exquisite for what it is. Now oil has a luminosity. Once you start thinning it out and working your layers on a canvas, for example, thin to heavier as you're putting those layers on, you can create an amazing depth with your mediums you're using in combination with the pigments and your colors, your relationships of colors to one another. Creates an amazing luminosity. Oils shine from within. That is the nature of these. It's because of it floating, the pigments, usually metal, in most cases, metal pigments or dyes that are floating around within that oil base creates this hovering of the color where light can actually shine through. They really do glow. There's no doubt about it. And it's so exquisite when you have the right varnishes, when you have the right glaze, a Damar, I mean, when you coat it with a Damar after, truly exceptional. There's nothing else like oil paint. As much as acrylic tries to be Mr. Versatility when it comes to multi-purpose, and you can get mediums that you can add to acrylic to make it, you know, dry slower, to alter the viscosity of it, alter some of the properties of it. It is never, ever going to be like this. And it's the nature that we talked about. The polymer, the acrylic resin base, versus the oil, and that sort of pigmentation floating within those oils and your mediums in combination with that. Okay, this is going to be this and water, H2O. So never be the same. Now, so I won't go into too many details about the acrylic. We have already. We've spent time on this. We haven't spent so much time on oil. Now, this here, like I said, the Aqua Duo, we're just going to do away with that. I don't like those. I think that those are a cheap imitation of oil. They still have a lot of the same chemical properties as oil, but the walnut oils, your mediums, your what you're adding to your paints is really what creates that lusciousness of the oil. So when you're just using water, it's not the same. Now, getting back to the brass tacks. Healthy, not so much. Keep that in mind. This is preparation heavy. Like I said about me even opening these and being hesitant about that, I would want to cover this whole table in plastic. I would want to tape everything off. I would want to have my thinners ready, you know, in a jar with ready to soak. I would have something like this. This is a little container where you can put your thinners, seal it up, you know, store your paints, keep everything separate so that there's no, you know, spillage that's happening. And incidentally, I got this at a Dollarama. It was $1, just so you know. As far as art supplies, never feel you have to spend a lot of money on art supplies, just as an example. Anyway, back to this. So this is going to be something that is not as intensive as the oil and the setup. Acrylic is fast, it dries fast, it works fast, it's water soluble. And I want to make sure that you're aware of this. When I say water soluble, it's before it dries. After it dries, it's done. It is rubber, it is polymer, it is a resin. It is not going anywhere. The only thing you can hope to do is peel it off or scrape it off. You can use mineral spirits on it to break its grip, but I mean, you can add water to it and make it workable again, like watercolor or gouache even. Not going to happen with that. So, have to work fast. You can add mediums to it to slow the drying time, but you're basically just stretching out the inevitable and the properties. Now, like I was talking about before, with this beautiful sheen that happens with the colors floating in the oil and your mediums, you're not going to get that with the acrylic because it is so thick and it's a matte, opaque finish. You can create the illusion of some blending, you can create some of that, and you can even coat it with Damar after to give it a nice sheen that has the illusion of that real depth of color, but nothing competes to oil. So, convenience will give you or drive you more towards this. Convenience, ease of use, more affordability because of things we've talked about will lead you to acrylic. A desire to sort of dig deeper into painting, to take your time, to layer, to explore materials, and quite frankly to spend a bit more money because these are more expensive. And you know, if you're not so concerned about your health or you have really good ventilation, this is the way to go. It takes time. Oil is not easy to work with because of its slow drying time and because of certain things you have to be aware of for layering and you know, thin to heavier to avoid some cracking that can happen because your canvas is always going to sort of, gravity plays a role on it, and it will inevitably create some cracking in the oil paint, which can create great looks, as you can see here with Da Vinci, the Mona Lisa. I mean, look at that cracking, it's part of its personality. So that is something that can work. These are things to consider. There's a lot of technicalities involved in oil paint, a lot of things you need to be aware of. For example, a glaze. What is a glaze? That's when you're using a third of linseed, a third of turpentine or a mineral spirit, and a third of varnish with a little bit of your pigment. You're creating a very light see-through glaze, which oil lends itself to create just this very transparent hint of color. And you can do multiple layers. I know artists who've done 40 layers of glazes to try and create this real depth. So it's time consuming, it's laborious, but incredibly rewarding, because what you are rewarded with in the end is a vibrant, luminant painting that nothing else can compete with. It takes years to get this down, years. Acrylic, pick up and go, no worry. You just hammer away and play with it. You mess it up, whatever, start a new one, because that one's already dry and you can just move right on. Keep that in mind. Now, something to keep in mind about this as well is you can have a base of acrylic. If you feel more comfortable putting your base of acrylic on, you can do it. You can make a painting of acrylic and then put oil over top. Okay, you can do this. The reason being is your oil, or rather your acrylic, is going to dry. It's opaque. It's pretty much airtight. You're not going to be too concerned about it. It's waterproof. So your oil, which needs to breathe, generally has a certain breathing space it needs. Layering on top is not going to cause an issue. Now, if you do it the other way, this breathing process that the oils require, the air they need, and even the light that they need to shine through them is going to be blocked by this, and it's going to seal your oils if you put acrylic on top. Bad, bad, bad. Don't do that. I've tested it. It does not work. It eventually resists, and the oil will force the acrylic off in bubbles, in chips, and everything. Keep that in mind. You can go this way. You can't go this way. Okay? And it's actually very good, because acrylic is easier to work with. You can do your base coat. You can do actually your whole underpainting in acrylic, and then just add touches of your oil to give it that vibrancy of color. Once again, it's being conscious of your materials, being really aware of the properties of these materials, and to successfully pull it off, you have to know oil, which takes time. So consider these things. Consider what you want to achieve, what you're going for, and what your space is. What kind of space do you have? Can you even work with something like oil? Do you have the ventilation? Do you have the proper facilities to do it? Keep that in mind. I would always recommend to start with this, move on to this. But if you're feeling brave, if you have the space and you want to get this, the sooner you start learning with oils, the better, because the sooner you'll master this. And that is going to be rewarding for you, and you're going to achieve things that nothing else can touch. Keep that in mind. Quick and easy, painless, laborious, time-consuming, health hazards, but incredibly rewarding on an artistic, creative level. That's what you need to consider. This takes weeks to dry, potentially months, minutes. Okay, like I said, you could add things to acrylic to change that, but we're talking about the base. So that is something important as well. A couple other things, what can I touch on? Well, let's look at some examples. Let's look at this. Let's check out Hockney, which is acrylic. Look at the properties of that. There's a flatness to it. It suited the work, there's no doubt about it. Even his commentary that he was going for. Beautiful. I love it. Love Hockney's work. Now let's move on to El Greco. This is 1610 to 1614, Lacune. And it's El Greco. I mean, if I could pronounce his actual name, Dominicus, excuse me, I'm sorry, I'm not very good at that. But El Greco, that's an oil painting. And look at the beauty of that. And especially considering 1612, you know, look at the amazing expression that he's utilizing here under the patronage of the church. And it really blows my mind. El Greco is truly amazing, and if you have the opportunity to see El Grecos in person, they're big, many of them are quite large. Exquisitely beautiful, and look at that blending, look at that. Of course, this doesn't do it justice. Looking at it this way, we're losing the aura of the art piece, as Berger would say, but we get a sense of it. You should go to your local museums, your local galleries to really see these properties of paints at play. Regardless, that's a little bit of an insight into acrylic versus oil. As always, explore. Most importantly, have fun with this. And we'll talk a little bit more. I mean, we've covered acrylic pretty much, I think, as much as we can drag this horse around. But oil, we haven't. Oil, because of its long history and its many faceted nuances to the material, we're probably going to have to spend a bit more time on this. But for this video, we're done. So thank you again for coming by. I always appreciate your time. If inclined, subscribe. It's incentive for me to do this for you. Plus, you'll know when I release a new video, and I plan on releasing many. So thank you again. Take care, be creative, and have fun.